Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us.
Always a pleasure.
Today we're going to be tackling something that's been on everyone's minds.
Definitely a hot topic.
Inflation.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at an article from the Heritage Foundation
Interesting.
and using that to explore the question of who is really to blame for rising prices.
Yeah, understanding inflation, it's crucial for making informed financial decisions, right? It's like having a secret decoder ring for the economy.
Exactly. So buckle up because the answer to who's to blame might not be what you expect.
And that's what we're here to do.
I think.
Dissect an argument, get you thinking critically,
Mhm.
no finger pointing, just analysis.
All right, so this Heritage Foundation article jumps right in. It's saying that the main drivers of inflation aren't the usual suspects, like greedy corporations or demanding workers.
Okay.
Instead, they're saying it's central bankers
Interesting.
and government spending.
Bold claims.
They even cite this pretty wild statistic. They say that by early 2022, 1/3 of all U.S. dollars in existence had been printed in just the 2 years before that.
1 in 3. Now, this ties into a fundamental economic principle, right? When you have too much money floating around, but not enough goods or services to actually spend it on, prices climb.
Oh, so it's like, I'm imagining like a bidding war.
Exactly. Too many eager buyers, not enough stuff to go around, basic supply and demand.
Okay, so are they saying that the government spending during the pandemic, all that money that was printed to fund all those programs, are they saying that that was like pouring gasoline on the fire?
That is their central argument, yes.
Yeah.
You had massive amounts of new money entering the economy, while at the same time lockdowns and those supply chain issues, right?
Right.
All of that was limiting the availability of goods and services.
Right.
Recipe for inflation, according to the Heritage Foundation.
So that's the government side of it. But what about the companies? We've been hearing so much about corporate profits going through the roof.
Yeah.
And the article even acknowledges this. They say that by mid-2022, annual pre-tax corporate profits were up by, get this, 50% compared to before the pandemic. That's an extra $1.1 trillion.
A lot of money.
Doesn't that mean corporations are price gouging?
Well, not necessarily. The article dives into this, and they offer 3 reasons why those profits might not be what they seem. The first reason, it goes back to all that money printing we talked about.
Okay.
When prices go up because of inflation, companies can sell their products at higher prices, right?
Right.
Leading to higher profits, at least on paper, even if their profit margin stays exactly the same.
So it's not that they're being greedier, it's just that their profits are being kind of magnified.
Exactly, by the inflationary environment itself.
Okay, I see. What's the second reason?
The second point they bring up has to do with accounting rules.
Yeah.
So when a company sells inventory that they bought before inflation hit, during a period of inflation, their profits appear larger than they actually are.
Oh, interesting.
Let me illustrate. Imagine a shop, right? Let's say they sell hats.
Okay, so we've got our stylish haberdashery.
They bought a bunch of hats for $9 each before inflation,
Right.
planning to sell them for $10.
Makes sense.
Now, inflation hits, prices go up, let's say 10%. So those $9 hats,
Yeah.
they're now selling for $11. Looks like their profit has doubled, right?
Right.
But here's the catch. They have to replace those hats, buy new inventory
Oh,
at the new inflated price of $10.
Gotcha.
So their actual profit,
Yeah.
still just $1 per hat. It's more of an accounting quirk than some, elaborate scheme.
It's all about context.
Precisely.
Okay, and what about that third reason? You were saying something about economic uncertainty.
Right. So their third point is all about how businesses act when faced with uncertainty, like, say, a potential recession. They get cautious. They might hold back on investments, maybe postpone buying new equipment,
Uh-huh.
cut back on advertising, maybe even delay hiring.
So less spending.
Exactly. Reduces their costs in the short term, which can make their profits look inflated, even if they're not selling more.
So basically, those profits might actually be a sign that they're worried, not greedy.
Precisely. The Heritage Foundation's argument is that just focusing on corporate profits doesn't tell the whole story. They see government policies and the impact of all that money printing as the real culprits.
Fascinating. But let's not forget about the workers, right? We're seeing more pay raises now after a while of shrinking paychecks. Some are saying this wageflation is fanning the flames.
Yeah, the age-old question.
Are workers driving inflation now?
It's a great question, and like most things with economics, the answer is nuanced. Wages are rising, that's true, but wages usually lag behind inflation.
So they're playing cash up.
Exactly. Trying to maintain their purchasing power when everything's getting more expensive.
Okay, so it's more a reaction to inflation than a cause.
Precisely. The Heritage Foundation argues that this focus on blaming corporations or workers, it might be a distraction, taking attention away from the government's role in all this, and especially the central banks.
This is getting pretty thought-provoking. There's one last point in the article that I want to highlight. They write, governments love to scapegoat the people for their screw-ups. It's enough to make you wonder if maybe Americans aren't actually at each other's throats. What do you think? Are we being distracted? Is the focus on corporate greed or workers' demands just a way to shift blame?
That's a sharp observation. And it really cuts to the core of this whole inflation puzzle.
Yeah.
This article makes a strong case for government policies, especially all that money printing being the primary driver.
Yeah.
But it also raises this question. Is blaming corporations or workers a convenient way to dodge responsibility and maybe even create division? Definitely something to think about. Yeah, it really does get to the heart of it all.
And while we're talking about these big economic theories, I think it's important to remember this isn't just some abstract debate.
Absolutely.
This has real-world consequences for everyone listening.
Right.
I mean, understanding inflation isn't just about economics.
Right.
It's about empowering yourself to make smarter financial decisions in your own life.
When we talk about inflation, we're not just talking about numbers on a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
We're talking about the very real impact it has on your ability to buy groceries, pay rent,
Right.
save for a house, even just enjoy a night out.
Yeah, or going to the movies.
Exactly. Because inflation, it erodes your purchasing power, plain and simple.
Exactly. And that's why I think grappling with these different perspectives on what's driving it is so important. It helps us navigate this whole tricky economic landscape and, hopefully make better choices for our own financial well-being.
For sure. Because if you think, for instance, that corporate greed is the main culprit behind inflation, you might be more likely to support, say, stricter price controls, right?
Sure.
Or tighter regulations on businesses.
Right.
But if you believe it's excessive government spending and all that money printing that's at the root of the problem, then you might advocate for things like fiscal restraint or different policies that encourage responsible monetary policy.
So it's about connecting these big picture ideas to our own personal decisions.
And that's where critical thinking comes in, right?
Yeah.
This deep dive isn't about telling you what to believe.
No?
It's about giving you the tools and information you need to form your own opinions.
We're just laying out the pieces.
Exactly. Letting you put the puzzle together
Yeah.
in a way that makes sense for you.
Okay, so let's assume for a minute that we buy into this whole money printing is the root of all evil argument,
Sure.
or at least the root of inflation.
The root of inflation, yeah.
What are some of the potential implications of that? Where does that line of thinking lead us?
Well, if we accept that premise, it really raises some questions about the role of those central banks
Yeah,
in managing the economy.
because the Heritage Foundation, they're pretty critical of central bankers.
They are.
They're basically suggesting that they've been blaming everyone else
Right.
while kind of ignoring their own role in fueling inflation.
It's a bold stance for sure.
They seem to be advocating for more transparency and accountability when it comes to how these institutions are managing our money supply.
Right. And if central banks are engaging in excessive money printing, we need to understand why.
Yeah.
What are the long-term consequences?
Yeah, because printing money, it's not like a magic solution where free money just appears out of thin air.
It's not.
There are always trade-offs.
Always trade-offs.
And those trade-offs have very real impacts on people's lives.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about those impacts.
Yeah.
Who really bears the brunt of these decisions?
When inflation takes hold, think about it. It's
Right.
often the most vulnerable people who are hit the hardest, right? People on fixed incomes,
Yeah.
those struggling to make ends meet, families just trying to put food on the table.
Yeah, it's tough.
They see their purchasing power dwindle as prices go up, and it becomes a daily struggle to afford those essentials.
And if they have any savings,
Right.
inflation eats away at those too.
It's a double whammy for sure.
So this isn't just about numbers, right? It's about people's lives.
Real human consequences, absolutely.
So we need to make sure that the folks making these decisions, whether it's central bankers, government officials, anyone in a position of power,
Right.
that they're accountable for how their policies affect everyday people.
Absolutely.
Well said. And this whole inflation debate is often tied to another hot topic, wages.
Of course.
We see a lot of headlines about workers demanding higher pay, and some argue that those pay raises are actually contributing to this inflationary spiral.
Right.
Is there any truth to that, or is it just another scapegoat?
It's complicated, and I think it's important to avoid oversimplifying things.
Yeah,
On the one hand, when wages go up, businesses often have to pass on those costs to consumers,
right.
higher prices.
It's that classic wage price spiral.
Exactly. But we also have to remember that, as we discussed earlier, wages often lag behind inflation.
They do.
Workers are often just trying to keep up,
Right.
maintain their purchasing power as the cost of everything around them is skyrocketing.
So rising wages could be seen as both a cause of inflation and a symptom of it.
Exactly. It's a bit of a chicken and egg situation.
Yeah.
The Heritage Foundation article seems to be suggesting that this focus on wages is a distraction.
Yeah.
It's taking our attention away from what they see as the bigger picture,
Right.
that it's the government's actions, particularly with regard to money printing, that are creating the conditions for inflation to take hold.
Okay, that's an interesting point. But if wages are lagging behind inflation and workers are losing purchasing power,
Yeah.
what does that mean for their standard of living? How can they keep up if their incomes aren't keeping pace?
That is the crucial question, and it really underscores the human cost of all of this.
Yeah.
It's not just about theories or numbers on a chart.
Right.
It's about people's ability to afford a decent life,
Right.
maintain their standard of living, and plan for the future.
It seems like we need to find solutions that address the root causes,
Absolutely.
not just the symptoms.
Right.
Because if we're always playing catch up, it's hard to see how anyone comes out ahead.
It's a multifaceted issue. No easy answers. But by understanding the different viewpoints,
Yeah.
looking at the evidence, and having these conversations,
Yeah.
we can hopefully work towards solutions that benefit everyone, not just a select few.
Well said. And I think this is a perfect segue into the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore some potential solutions and takeaways from this whole discussion about inflation and how it's affecting all of our lives.
Sounds good.
So stay tuned. All right, welcome back, everyone. We're wrapping up our deep dive into inflation, trying to figure out who or what's to blame for those rising prices.
And more importantly, what it all means for you. We've explored a lot of different perspectives today.
Yeah, from that Heritage Foundation article and their take on government spending to the impact on businesses, workers, and, everyday consumers.
It's been quite a journey, a complex topic for sure.
Definitely complex, but hopefully you're starting to see that bigger picture, how it all fits together.
And why understanding inflation is so crucial, not just for your personal finances, but also for being part of these big conversations that affect us all.
Absolutely. So let's shift gears a bit and talk solutions. If we accept this idea that printing too much money is driving inflation, what can we do?
Right. What's the path forward? Well, the Heritage Foundation article, they're big on advocating for a more restrained approach to monetary policy.
So pump the brakes on printing money.
Exactly. And governments need to get their spending under control.
They're pretty clear about that.
It's a common argument. It aligns with a lot of economists who believe in sound money principles.
Sound money, huh?
Yeah, the idea is that a stable currency is the bedrock of a healthy economy. And creating too much money out of thin air, it can lead to all sorts of problems.
Like inflation, obviously.
Right. Inflation, asset bubbles, instability, even economic chaos.
So it's kind of like if you keep adding more and more money to the system, each dollar becomes worth less.
Exactly. It's like diluting a drink with too much water, it loses its strength.
Makes sense.
And that's why people who like these sound money policies, they often push for things like a return to the gold standard.
Oh, wow. Back to gold.
Or other mechanisms that would basically limit how much money central banks can print. It's about putting up those guardrails.
Trying to keep inflation from spiraling out of control.
Precisely. But of course, not everyone agrees with this approach. Some economists argue that a more flexible monetary policy is key for economic growth and for tackling things like unemployment.
Okay, so two sides to the coin.
Always two sides.
Yeah.
They might say that being too strict with sound money policies could actually make it harder for policymakers to respond to, say, an economic downturn.
It's about finding that balance, right?
Exactly. Encouraging growth while keeping things stable.
Tough job.
It is. And that's why these debates are so important. Exploring those different viewpoints, looking at the evidence, it's how we hopefully find solutions that work for everyone.
Okay, so let's bring this back down to earth. What are some takeaways for our listeners? What can they do to protect themselves in this climate?
Practical advice. Well, I think the most important thing is simply awareness. By understanding how inflation works, what's causing it, the different perspectives on solutions, you're already a step ahead.
Knowledge is power, as they say.
Exactly. It helps you make those informed decisions about your finances, your investments, even your career path.
So stay informed. What else?
Diversification. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Spread your risk across different types of assets. It can help if one area takes a hit.
Diversification, always good advice, especially when things are a little shaky.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And remember, diversify your skills too, your income streams.
Oh, that's interesting.
In an inflationary environment, it's key to be adaptable, learn new things, pivot if you need to.
So never stop learning. Be ready to adapt.
Exactly. And finally, stay engaged. Don't tune out. Don't just accept things at face value. Question those assumptions, challenge the narratives, demand transparency from the folks making those big economic decisions.
Your voice matters. Get involved. Shape the future.
Couldn't have said it better.
So stay aware, diversify, and make your voice heard. 3 powerful tools.
For navigating these turbulent times and building a more resilient future.
Well said. I think that wraps up our deep dive into inflation. We've covered a lot of ground, but remember, it's just the beginning.
Always more to learn, more to explore.
Absolutely. But as we leave you today, we'll leave you with a question to ponder. How might the potential consequences of inflation play out differently for people from different socioeconomic backgrounds?
It's a tough one, with no easy answers, but it's worth thinking about.
Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. We'll be back soon with another fascinating topic to explore.
Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, keep diving deep.
See you next time.